Kursk Oblast, Russia, January 2025, 3 o'clock in the morning. The snow is ankle deep. A Ukrainian Special Forces unit is moving through the darkness after a firefight, checking the fallen. They find a figure lying face down in the white. One of the Ukrainians approaches, reaches down, grabs the man's leg to check for signs of life. The figure screams, not in Russian, in Korean, and then detonates a grenade against his own head. The Ukrainian soldiers swiftly open fire and dive back. South Korean lawmakers were told by the country's intelligence service that the soldiers' last words were, "General Kim Jong-un." The man who just died in a frozen field in western Russia was not a Russian soldier. He was not a mercenary. He carried a fake Russian military ID, identifying him as a 29-year-old named Menchat, supposedly from the Russian border region of Tuva near Mongolia. A document issued to conceal his real identity and his country's involvement in a war it officially denied fighting. He was a North Korean soldier, thousands of miles from home, fighting in someone else's war. Given orders that if captured, there was only one acceptable outcome. He followed them. This was not an isolated incident. This was policy. Ukrainian President Zelensky stated that North Korean and Russian forces were apparently finishing off their own wounded Korean troops to prevent their capture, a pattern confirmed across multiple battlefield engagements in the Kursk region. What we're about to hear is the story of how a hermit kingdom sent its sons to die in a European war, handed them fake identities, programmed them to kill themselves rather than talk, and called their deaths heroic. Now Kim Jong-un, the man who gave those orders, stood before the families of the dead and said his heart ached. An estimated 6,000 North Korean soldiers have been killed in Ukraine as of early 2026. British intelligence reporting nearly 50% casualties among all deployed troops. To understand how North Korean soldiers ended up dying in Russian snow, you have to trace a chain of decisions that started long before the first boots hit the ground. It starts in June 2024 when Vladimir Putin flew to Pyongyang for a state visit that the Western press largely treated as theater. It was not theater. Kim and Putin signed a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty that included a mutual defense clause cementing an alliance that would, within months, put North Korean soldiers on a European battlefield for the first time in history. The deal made sense for both men in ways that the outside world was slow to appreciate. Putin needed bodies. By mid-2024, Russia's casualty rate had gutted its professional military. The conscript system was straining under the political cost of sending Russian sons to die in what the Kremlin still called a special military operation. Prison recruits, signing bonuses, North Korean shells. Putin was buying time and blood. Kim needed something else entirely. Russia's war in Ukraine gave North Korea's inexperienced military the opportunity to gain combat experience on the world's most technologically advanced battlefield testing weapon systems, gaining access to Russian military technologies, and securing Moscow's assistance in countering UN sanctions. It was a transaction dressed as brotherhood, and then Ukraine changed the equation. On August 6, 2024, Ukrainian forces launched a surprise incursion into Russia's Kursk Oblast, the largest invasion of Russian territory by a foreign military since World War II. Ukraine's most experienced, battle-hardened units quickly seized approximately 1,300 square kilometers of Russian territory. Russia's defense was initially shambolic and disorganized. Putin needed that territory back fast, not just for strategic reasons, but for the optics of a man who had promised his people that foreign forces would never set foot on Russian soil. Approximately 1,500 North Korean special forces were first observed arriving in Russia's far eastern city of Vladivostok for training, before being joined by another 10,000 soldiers and transported nearly 7,000 kilometers across Russia by train to reach the combat zone. They were placed under Russian military command, issued Russian uniforms and equipment, and given forged identity documents attributing them to the Russian region of Tuva, thereby concealing any evidence of North Korean involvement. Real names replaced with Russian aliases. Signatures written in Korean on documents that claimed Russian identities. Soldiers told they were going on training exercises only to find themselves weeks later charging Ukrainian trenches in the dark. What happened when those soldiers reached the front line is one of the most disturbing battlefield stories of this entire war. Not because the North Koreans were unstoppable, but because of what they revealed about what Kim Jong-un had made them into. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces described brutal and near-suicidal tactics. Soldiers who detonated grenades against their own heads to avoid capture. Soldiers who removed their helmets and heavy protective body armor to move faster in attacking Ukrainian positions. soldiers who used fellow wounded comrades as bait to lure out Ukrainian attack drones. A commander with the Ukrainian 6th Special Operations Forces, speaking to CNN under a call sign, described what his unit faced. "They can just brazenly go into battle until they are neutralized. Despite all attempts to call them to surrender, they will continue to fight," he said. "They move very fast, literally run. Every shelter, every car, they just destroy with anti-tank grenade launchers." And yet, for all their discipline and ferocity, the North Korean soldiers were catastrophically unprepared for the defining weapon of this war, the drone. The tactics they employed were based on military concepts at least 4 decades old, advancing infantry fronts without mechanized support, strategies that completely neglected the decisive role of drone warfare in modern conflicts, which the North Koreans had no prior experience with. Ukrainian FPV drones, guided by operators watching real-time video feeds, hunted them in open fields where their fast-moving infantry charges offered no protection whatsoever. Russian soldiers captured by Ukrainian forces complained bitterly about fighting alongside the North Koreans, saying they shot at anything that flew Russian drones, Ukrainian drones, it didn't matter. "The farther away from the Koreans, the calmer it is," one captured Russian soldier said. "The casualties were staggering and fast." North Korean troops were reportedly pulled back from the front lines by January 2025, the reason appearing to be devastating casualties confirmed by multiple Ukrainian and Western intelligence sources. Only 2 North Korean soldiers were ever taken alive. One of them said he did not know he was going to war against Ukraine, believing he and his troops were being sent for training exercises. By January 3rd, he found himself in an active operation, witnessed North Korean soldiers dying around him, and hid in a dugout for 2 days before being found on January 5th. He thought he was going to train. He woke up in a war. Meanwhile, back in Pyongyang, the memorials were already being built. Kim Jong-un held a ceremony praising troops who chose self-blasting, presenting them as heroes who defended the country's honor, publicly confirming standing orders that soldiers must kill themselves rather than be captured. He called their campaign a new history written in blood. He pinned medals to photographs on a memorial wall, each soldier's name written in gold beneath their image. And then, North Korea pledged to triple its military contribution, preparing to send an additional 25,000 to 30,000 troops to Russia. Korea's new naval destroyer launch, April 2025. Cut to imagery of North Korean missile tests. Cut to maps of the Korean peninsula. And on a single soldier's photograph pinned to a memorial wall in Pyongyang. Name in gold. Camera slowly pulls back to reveal hundreds more. Here is what the world is still failing to fully reckon with. Kim Jong-un did not lose this gamble. He won it. 6,000 dead soldiers, 50% casualty rate, and by every strategic metric that matters to Pyongyang, the Ukraine deployment has been one of the most profitable military decisions Kim has ever made. North Korea's economy grew 3.7% in 2024. Its fastest annual rate in 8 years, driven substantially by Russian payments for arms and personnel. From the summer of 2023 to the end of 2025, North Korea's arms sales to Russia generated more than $10 billion, significantly improving the country's economy with arms sales large enough that a single shipment of artillery shells could enable North Korea to purchase hundreds of thousands of tons of rice for its starving population. But the money is almost secondary to what Kim received in technology. Kim launched North Korea's largest naval destroyer in April 2025 and tested a supersonic cruise missile that experts say closely resembles a nuclear-capable Russian-model technology transfers that would have taken North Korea decades to develop independently, now accelerated by Putin's gratitude. And the surviving soldiers, the ones who came home, did not come home empty-handed either. Around 3,000 experienced North Korean soldiers have already returned to North Korea to serve as military instructors, passing on 21st-century warfare skills, drone operation, electronic warfare, combined arms tactics to the rest of the North Korean army. Kim sent in his least experienced troops. He got back a cadre of battle-hardened veterans who now understand how modern war actually works. Veterans who are currently teaching everything they learned to the next generation of North Korean soldiers. For South Korea, for Japan, for the United States, for every country that has spent decades managing the threat of a North Korean military stuck in Cold War doctrine, this is the nightmare scenario. An isolated, nuclear-armed regime has just run a live combat training program on the world's most advanced battlefield. It funded that program with the blood of its own soldiers and called those soldiers heroes. And it paid for Russian nuclear and missile technology with the profits. North Korea's army numbers around 1,280,000 active personnel, with an additional 3 million in reserve. With Kim's apparent willingness to treat soldiers as expendable and a similar view of human life to Putin's, further waves of reinforcements in the tens of thousands are not unlikely. The soldiers on the memorial wall in Pyongyang, names written in gold beneath their photographs, did not know they were going to war. They were told they were training. They died in a frozen field in Russia, shouting the name of a man who turned their deaths into a transaction. And that man is still in power, still building missiles, still sending more soldiers. The scoreboard that matters most is not the one counting Russian equipment losses or Ukrainian territory. It is the one no one is watching closely enough. The one counting what Kim Jong-un received in exchange for 6,000 of his own men. Because whatever number is on that scoreboard, it was worth it to him. And that is the most dangerous sentence in this entire war.